I charge my watch in the closet and leave the light on until it's on my wrist. I don't rely on remembering. I just know that if the light is on, my watch isn't. This is dead simple. It is a visual trigger for me and requires absolutely zero discipline. If your boundaries keep getting double crossed, I want you to consider that it might be a systems problem. What if instead of relying on willpower only, you just designed it out of the equation entirely? We talk about setting boundaries, but nobody talks about what holds them up when the willpower runs out. And I promise you, it will run out. That's what today's about. So stick with me because I'm going to show you the three specific types of controls you can build around any boundary. I'm going to walk you through exactly how my clients are using them right now. And I'm going to share the embarrassing one I had to build for myself because, yes, I teach this and I still need it. Hey, y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome to the Life Management System, the show built for working moms who are doing all the things but still feel behind. Here we trade burnout for boundaries and survival mode for something that actually feels like a life. So every life management system I build with a client is different because it is incredibly customized to what she values, her unique goals, and her unique needs and conditions. So when I say conditions, think about things like how old her kids are and whether she has to go into the office or her partner has to go into the office, whether she even has a partner, whether she has family around to help her, whether one of her family members has special neurological needs. A lot of my clients are ADHD or have family members that are. Some of them have even different physical or neurological limitations. So all of the stuff makes up for her unique life management system because her goals, her needs, what she values is different from everybody else. But there are foundational principles that show up every single time I work with somebody. So today I'm teaching you one of those life design principles. In the last episode, I introduced this notion of a life design principle, which specifically around lowering the barrier to things that might matter most to you. So when you think about the goals that you have in place, how do you make sure that you protect making sure those goals happen? Today, we're actually going to flip that totally on its head. So it's a very similar principle, but just in the absolute opposite direction. So together, those two life design principles are probably the most powerful place to start building your life management system. And it's probably easiest for you to understand what it is that I'm talking about if I illustrate through a tactical example. I'm going to talk about my watch. I wear a Apple Watch religiously. I track my sleep. I care a lot about that. I track my steps to make sure I'm getting them in. I care a lot about that. But that leaves very little room for me to actually charge my watch. So every single night when I'm getting ready for bed, that's when I charge my watch. But here's what I do. My charger is in the closet, and I do that by design because that allows me to leave my closet light on. And that way I'm not having to rely on my memory to remember like, oh, hey, Courtney, before you go to bed, you need to remember to grab your watch. Because I track my sleep religiously. I care a lot about that. Um, but in order to actually remember, hey, grab your watch, I leave that light on. I don't want to have to carry that mental load. And frankly, I can't trust my brain to remember. Like I have all this other stuff and I like to be like when I get ready for bed, I like to be able to turn that brain off. That is the one time of day I'll sit there and I'll watch a show on my iPad in the bathroom or I'll listen to an audiobook. But as I'm getting ready, I'm doing one of those two things. I like to be able to turn my brain off. I don't want to have to remember, quite frankly. So I know that when that light's on, my watch isn't on me. It's that dead simple. I just have this visual trigger, and that requires me to know exactly what I need to do with zero discipline. So, that closet light in that idea taught me more about how I actually protect what matters to me than any conversation that I've had around boundaries. Essentially, that visual cue serves as a control. So for those of you that are in corporate, and I know many of you are, you're likely familiar with the concept of controls because they are a form of risk management protection inside business processes, most particularly in regulated businesses. So a control, for any of you who are not aware, is essentially a pre-decided rule that becomes your fail-safe. So what you do is you change the environment altogether. You introduce conditions in order to create enough friction and enough protection so that what you really want to protect becomes easier or becomes foolproof. So think about things in your personal life, like changing your phone settings or building a calendar architecture. I was talking just this morning around with one of my clients around how to move pieces on our calendar to actually protect the time she needed protecting. Or maybe you leverage auto replies when you're taking time off because you want to be able to protect that time. So the best part of a control is that, very similar to my light in my closet, it didn't ask anything of me in the moment. I had to do nothing. And that's the thing about working moms. We tend to be the ones that insert ourselves into processes, and those processes then depend on us. So when life gets really busy, everything falls apart, or we fall apart. Like, we become the ones that risk ourselves and our sanity because we know the entire ecosystem and infrastructure depends on us to survive. That's a problem. And that's the beautiful thing about controls. It actually doesn't. It allows you to set it and forget it. So that way you make the decision once, then you let go of the control and let the process itself do the work. Let the control do the work. So I believe fully that controls are critical to successful systems. Like, they're the ones doing the dirty work for us. So most notably, though, most of us, or for most of us, I should say, controls are also a way to protect boundaries. Boundaries is something that is a topic I am most passionate about. I host a boundaries mastermind that all of my clients go through for a reason, because it allows them to pressure test where they're leaking energy in ways that they often don't know. So we tend to set boundaries with all of the best intentions. We know I'm going to set this boundary with work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I hear that language all the time. But then when you're not well rested, or you don't have clarity, or you are less motivated, or your stress is getting tested, your patience is getting tested, you're tired, someone asks you nicely, that's, like, well, can you pretty please, blah, blah, blah. When all that stuff happens, despite the best intentions that you had in setting that boundary when you were clear-eyed and motivated, when that stuff goes sideways, willpower is the first thing to go. So when that happens, the boundary itself, that's not what's failing. But the problem is you don't have the appropriate systems in place to actually protect it, because willpower alone is not the right tool for this job. So it's for this very reason that last year when I was going into the office, so I'm actually going back into a corporate role for a little bit. Yay! I'm excited about it. That's a story for another day. Was not on the bingo card, but it is what it is. But when I was in corporate before, I was head of culture at a Fortune 50. We had to be in 3 days a week in person, and everybody else seemed to go in Tuesday through Thursday. That was their jam. Or I had a lot of people who would actually go Monday through Wednesday. They're like, I want to get it out of the way and have my weekend. I took the exact opposite approach. So Friday, I would always go in Wednesday through Friday. There's a lot behind why my schedule is that way. If you're interested, I will also link that in the show notes. I have another episode on how to go deeper, that goes deeper into how I organize my schedule. But one of the reasons that I decided to go on Friday is because that served as a boundary for me. I know myself. I know that I did not have the willpower to be disciplined enough to not yap to my friends when I saw them when I was in the office, or to not take on mentorship meetings when people would stop by my desk. So in order to protect my time and the time I knew I needed to get my work done, my control was essentially, I'm going to go in on Fridays because nobody else is going to be there. And that's what saved me from myself. So in the last episode, number 91, we talked about the life design principle of lowering your barrier to entry to make the things that you want more of. So things like date nights and workout and girlfriend time, that much more possible. So if you haven't listened to that, it complements this episode really well. I think you should tune in. But this is another essentially life design principle. And it essentially runs back what I talked about last episode, and we put it in complete reverse. So essentially, what I want you doing is I want you to raise the barrier to entry of those things that drain you or the things that are in opposition to your boundaries that, whatever boundary it is that you're trying to protect. So you're essentially designing a environment so that the right choice becomes the path of least resistance and the wrong choices require extra effort and make it harder for you. So that friction is what allows you the opportunity to protect that boundary. So I've got three categories of controls that I use, essentially, friction or double checks that make up this life management system. So the first one is environmental design. So environmental design is where you change the physical setup so that temptation isn't in reach. So as an example, my closet light, like that is a physical setup. I turn my closet light on when I charge my watch. When I'm ready to leave the room, I naturally turn off the lights. And if I forget to put my watch on, I clearly forgot to turn off that light. I will see it. I will go back and do that. Another thing that I do physically, like environmentally, is that when I am going into the office and often sometimes at home, if I have, like, if I'm fearful that I'm going to be tempted to let my emotions win the next day and like, oh, I'm going to eat this, like I don't want to eat this healthy thing for lunch because I know we have that really other sexy object that my tummy and my taste buds are going to like better. Um, I packed my lunch the night before because especially when I was going into the office, that made it that much easier. That way I didn't let my emotions win. Like I upheld the thing that I value, which is eating healthy. And I protected myself against not eating healthy. I also have quite a few clients that are working on different types of boundaries. So oftentimes when we think about boundaries, we think about access. And sometimes, sure, it's about access. So as an example, I have a client who is trying to manage the amount of time she spends on her phone. And to protect herself against doing that, she now charges her phone in her bathroom. So that way she's not tempted to just sit there and like endlessly doom scroll when she's in bed. She will give herself 15 minutes and then she will go charge her phone in the bathroom and then go to bed. But I have another client who is struggling with financial boundaries. She is from Romania. She wants to go home for Christmas and I fully support that. But in order to make going home to Romania for Christmas manageable, she has to get her financial spend under control. So in order to do that, an environmental control for her that we put in place was having her order her groceries online. And that way she's not walking around the store tempted by all the shiny objects that seem a lot sexier. She also is really into health. So it also enables her to stay focused on the foods that she knows will fuel her body, as opposed to the junk that is very tempting for most of us. Um, and then I have another client who does this for herself, but she does it at Target. Like she is like, I cannot afford to go in Target and I need to put that in place for myself. I just haven't. But amen. So okay, so that first principle is environmental. The second one is friction by design. So what I mean by that is how do you make the unwanted behavior much harder to access? So as an example, going back to that Romanian client who wants to go home and is struggling with getting her finances, like paying off debt and getting her finances under control, I had her only travel with cash. So only, I'm like, when you go to drop off your kids at daycare every day, you travel with 20 bucks. Like that's enough for an emergency. That's enough for you to get gas if something happens. Like that's enough for all of that. Or you just remove Apple Pay altogether from your phone, and that way you can't sit there and click. So those are two very easy friction by design principles for a boundary that is not necessarily about access or time. It's about finances. Like there's so many different types of boundaries. Or I had another client who got very stressed out by like she'd wake up in the morning and she'd look at her phone and she'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm already in a bad mood before the day even started. So what we did with her is we just had her remove her work email from she has an Apple phone. So we removed it from the native app on Apple and moved her work email to Outlook. And what that did is it allowed her to move the second, like she moved her email to the second screen so she wasn't automatically seeing it. And then she stopped the push notifications during certain hours. So very basic, very easy. But that way she got to start her day on her own terms as opposed to seeing what hit her at 7 a.m. and already having to dread the day. Or had another client who was trying to restrict her social media time. So we put limit restrictions on certain apps. We also considered the brick. If we haven't actually used the brick, but I hear it comes highly recommendable. So essentially, if you're not familiar, and I will link this in the show notes, by the way, if you're not familiar, you brick your phone by it's a little disc that you put somewhere, not like you're not going to put it at your desk, maybe somewhere accessible, like your fridge, but not immediately somewhere where all you have to do is overextend. Like you might have to get up and go to a different room. But the idea is you brick your phone and that brick locks you out of certain apps. So if you want to get more serious about your, like, I don't know, introducing intervention around your relationship with social media, I do highly recommend that based on my friends that have used it. Normally, I don't like to recommend things that I haven't personally tried, but I do not have a social media problem and I depend on it for work. So I am really good at, I only am in social media from 12 to 12:15 at night. It's like my bedtime is hard 12:15, but I don't get on it. Sometimes I'll get on to yap to you guys. So if you don't follow me at Working Moms Movement. Sometimes during my stories, I will get on to share something or to post something that I see in the moment. But normally I don't, like, I'm very good about not doing that. So I'm not really worried about it, but it comes highly recommended. Okay, so the last principle, we've talked about environment, we've talked about friction by design. The last is leveraging timing as a control by scheduling around the most vulnerable windows. So as an example, I talked about while I would go into the office on Fridays instead of going into the office on Tuesdays like most of my friends. Or that client that I talked about, the Romanian client that's saving money to go back home for Christmas. What I would have her do is I'd have her schedule her client calls immediately after a school drop off. So that way she didn't have breathing room in her schedule to be tempted to go to Target or Home Goods or TJ Maxx when she was passing it on her way home. So that schedule actually served as a boundary protection for her. It served as a control to help prevent her from spending unnecessarily. Okay. So to recap, controls keep you from forgetting something, or they keep you from breaking boundaries that matter to you. They keep you from getting in your own way. But here's the irony. Even though I teach this, like I know this principle, I believe so passionately about it. I coach on boundaries. I coach on process design. I coach on building and setting up systems. And yet I still have to engineer it deliberately for myself because knowing this alone doesn't make me any more immune to the temptation of a normal human. I am still very much a normal human. I might be a strategic one, but I am human. So as an example, I am wildly committed to getting back to my pre-baby weight, or at least close to it. I was 107. I'm not going to go back to that. I don't think that's physically possible based on the size of my hips after having 2 kids. But I am committed to getting closer to that hemisphere before my youngest turns 10, which, gosh, 10, who thought I'd still be having this battle so many years later? But I also know that I am my own worst enemy. So I tend to have a glass or two of wine between, like, I normally am finished with for the past couple of years, actually, I've been finished with meetings at like 4 o'clock, but the boys don't get off the bus until 5:30. So knowing that that's my temptation and knowing that's when I tend to break this one thing that I care about, I've intentionally started scheduling meetings with people during that 4 to 5:30 time period. So that way I'm not tempted or my discipline isn't vulnerable enough to actually crumble. So imagine there's something like that for you too. Like you're thinking like, gosh, I would love to be able to do this one thing. I'm not sure how. So coming off this episode, I want you to think about that. I want you to go through your week and try to pick one boundary that you keep getting in your way of, that you personally keep double crossing. Then I want you to identify that moment that it breaks down. And I'm like, the thought process of I'm bad at this is not it. I want you thinking about that actual very specific moment or that specific trigger. Then design one control or one piece. So, like, again, control. It could be a piece of friction, it can be an environmental change, or it can be that timing pivot. So, one control for you that removes the decision from that moment entirely. Because controls work in every area of your life. So, I've talked about things like social media and finances. I've talked about sleep. Sleep's another big one. Work emails. Like, I don't know. There's, just so many areas that controls can be applicable to you and a very helpful tool. But knowing this framework, knowing the life design principles of putting friction in place or putting controls in place and lowering your barrier to entry, knowing those design principles is only half of it. Because the other half is actually being able to see the opportunities in your life. And that's the kind of place and the kind of work that I do and spend with my clients. So if you're sitting here thinking, I know I need this, but I genuinely cannot see where to start, that's what I'm here for, my friends. So if you're ready to build a life management system that puts you back in control of your time and gets you out of that chokehold of your to-do list, I'd love to sit down with you. So I always offer free clarity calls. We sit down, we go through what's not working, and then we figure out where we start. So I will link a evaluation call, a clarity call in the show notes. So that way you were able to get time on my calendar. It's free, but oftentimes it is what unlocks big insights for people. And if you're unsure if that's the right next step for you, it might feel a little extreme, but you're also not sure where your edges are being crossed or double crossed even by you, I'd encourage you to take my boundaries quiz. So it is a 3-minute self-check and will tell you the place you can actually start to prioritize regarding how to design controls into your life, into your processes and systems. So I will link this in the show notes as well, but you can get that at workingmomsmovement.com/boundaries. And then last, if this is a type of strategic application is helpful, I'm going to encourage you to listen to episode 91. This episode was about how to make it easier to say no to the wrong things, or by making those wrong things harder. Episode 91 is the inverse. It is about how to say yes to the right things and make that easier. So it's a two-sided coin of the same framework. I am also going to list, I had 2 boundaries episodes that were very early on in this podcast. I'm going to link those as well. But until next time, friends, thanks for joining. If nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, mama. If this episode clicked for you, episode 91 is your next step. That one was about making the right things easier to say yes to. And together, these 2 episodes are basically the entire set of principles. I'll link it right here. See you there.